finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
Back again this week. We're going to do another installment on follow-up from where we started with regards to the opiate crisis and move on to how things got so much worse after we started to decrease opiate prescribing about 10 years or so. But first, May has a message.
Yeah, before we dive into today's episode, I want to share a great opportunity brought to you by our friend Jimmy Turner over at the Physician Philosopher. This is for all the physicians out there who are trying to find balance, but are overwhelmed by the daily to-do list and all their responsibilities as partners, parents, and physicians. Or maybe you are doing okay, but you want to be doing great. Does this sound like you? If so, then the Alpha Coaching Experience is the answer that you've been looking for. This 12-week coaching program includes weekly group coaching and one-on-one coaching sessions, plus a course library full of self-coaching tools. It's one of the only programs with doctors coaching doctors. So if you're looking to reduce your burnout, improve your satisfaction in life, and create a life you love and deserve, don't wait. Spring enrollment is on sale now. The doors for Alpha Coaching close on February 22nd at midnight. For more information, go to drpodcastnetwork.com/alpha. That's drpodcastnetwork.com/alpha. ALPHA.
All right, to dive right into today's episode, we're going to pick up where we left off. As a bit of a review from last time, we talked about how a 5-sentence letter to the New England Journal of Medicine launched what ended up becoming a decades-long catastrophe with prescribing of opiates. So in 1980, there was that letter that said, essentially, if somebody has a legitimate cause of pain, their risk of opiate addiction is almost non-existent. So then we move on to the mid-90s, where we had OxyContin produced by Purdue Pharma, who ended up kind of on everyone's crap list. And then by 2001, regulators got involved, and we ended up with the most non-scientific thing I think I've seen in a very long time, which was pain is the fifth vital sign. So we really forced medical practitioners to focus on people's pain, which, okay, I get it. Everyone has pain, but just because there's a problem like pain doesn't mean that there's a solution or a good solution.
Right, and what I get frosty about with that one is it's not objective. It's very subjective. Unlike, people understand taking your blood pressure, pulse, temperature, but pain, what is a 10 out of 10 to one person is a 5 out of 10 to another person. So it's crappy. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it's not objective, so it can't be a vital sign. Just pretty simple science right there. So then we move on to around 2010, and this is where today's story really starts. So around 2010, we had a pretty significant decrease in opiate prescribing. And like May had mentioned in the last episode a couple weeks ago about how we had to go to a class when we moved here about treating people's pain. And then fast forward about 20-ish years, and then we had to go to a class about not prescribing opiates anymore, both sponsored by the state. So then what happened? Show us, May, you might want to discuss some of the graphs we've seen as far as what happened when prescribing of opiate medications went down.
Yeah, it's pretty dramatic. I'm getting this right from the CDC website, but there's just a dramatic graph on there that shows the waves of opioid overdose deaths. But three major things happen. One is that rise, like you said, in prescription opioid overdose deaths in 99. And then in 2010, all of a sudden, that kind of flatlines and the curve spikes up when we see a giant increase in heroin overdose deaths.
So what year? Assuming 2010 is sort of the epiphany where the medical establishment says, hey, we got to lay off this stuff. When does that shoulder start to go up as far as heroin?
It's 2010.
Yeah, it's 2010.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so then, and again, we saw this in clinical practice. I mean, it was right around that time. I mean, it was like 2011, 2012, something like that. I was working in an urgent care shift. Kid comes in. He's got a big injection site abscess from sharing needles. And I said, hey, we as a medical establishment own some of this. We, wrote too many prescriptions, blah, blah, blah. He goes, I don't ever even think of looking for prescription drugs anymore. He said, because heroin is way more available and it's way less expensive.
Yeah, and we were kind of, I guess, naive at that point. I mean, because guess who told us you can get this stuff at school? I mean, it was our kids. Our kids were in high school, and they were just basically laughing, or junior high at that point. But even when they were in high school, just laughing at the whole thing of, like, nobody's coming to the doctor anymore asking for oxys or Vicodin because they just all get heroin. Everyone's doing heroin.
Okay, so then how did that change as far as, heroin deaths were in, where did they go?
Oh, the best place I've found is looking at the National Institute of Health numbers. They've got all kinds of lovely graphs numbers for you that are into that. If you look for they don't really. I'm trying to find where they separate it out.
Because heroin, as I understand, heroin overdose deaths for basically ever were about 2,000 a year. Okay, we're about 2,000 a year.
Yeah. So here we go. You're right. 1960, 2000, from 99, and then it dramatically goes up. They basically give you at 2016, it's already 16,000 by 2016. So in that space of time between 99 and then 2016, when they track it, it's gone from 2,000 up to 16,000.
Okay, so it's an eightfold increase in heroin deaths, but that doesn't really tell the story, because when you think of it, okay, so heroin's
and it's not just, actually, it's good to note that they combine it's not just heroin alone, it's heroin as well as combination with synthetic opioids other than methadone. So you get this. Those include both. You
get this spike, but then it gets really, really crazy because the heroin use goes up, but heroin's been around for, over 100 years. Mm-hmm. And, it's gone in and out of style. I remember when we started practice here, there was no heroin. I mean, it was all meth. It was all...
No, heroin was something that I just, you'd see on movies from TV.
Yeah, I mean, it just didn't exist. And then the, some regulations and so forth changed with meth. It's like it went out of style. It's like meth was bell bottoms, and now we're back to, pedal pushers or whatever. I mean, it's like, ooh, it's back in style, yay. And so then, again, like 1999, 2,000 heroin deaths, 2016, we're up to like 16,000, and what happened? Well, prescribing changed, okay? And so then a lot more people died because they're using illicit drugs. But then it went really, really, really crazy because you mentioned it right there, which was synthetic opioids. And that is where the entire game changes. I'm going to read a quote for you from a book I just read by Ben Westhoff. It's called Fentanyl Incorporated. I would absolutely recommend it to anyone, especially physicians, so you get a clue as far as what's going on in your communities that you do not see.
Yeah, I'm going to just jump in because that's the third, they call it the third wave, is wave 3 in 2013 with the rise in synthetic opioid overdose deaths.
So I'm going to read this quote. So driven by fentanyl, overdose drug deaths are, by the time of this book's publication, which was 2019, for the first time killing more Americans under 55 than anything else. More than gun homicides, more than even AIDS during the peak years of the crisis, As of 2017, Americans were statistically more likely to die from an opioid overdose than a car accident. More than 68,000 Americans died from drug overdoses in 2018. So when you look at this, it's fascinating, right? Because if you never use illicit drugs, you are at exactly zero risk of dying of a illicit drug overdose, right? It's not like people are running around with blowgunning fentanyl into people and they're dying. These are people that are seeking out a recreational substance and it's killing them. So that is a small subset of people, but it kills a huge percentage of them when you look at that. Whereas in car wrecks, virtually everyone either drives or rides in a car. And even you don't even have to ride in a car to be killed in an MVA. If you're a pedestrian crossing the street and you get mowed over, it still goes into the car wreck data.
Yeah.
So this is really staggering.
So listen to this. I mean, you basically said it, but by the data that I have on by 2019, it's now over 70,000 drug-involved overdose deaths reported. 68% they isolate out are males, and that is a 14-fold increase from 2012 to 2019.
Okay, so let's dive into what the heck changed and why is it so different. Okay, so fentanyl, first of all, and it's fentanyl. It is fentanyl that is doing this, it's clear. It's not like all of a sudden crack came back. There are some other drug overdose deaths that we'll get into that are very closely related to what happened with fentanyl from a regulatory perspective, from a war on drugs perspective, and so forth. So first of all, we're going to go get in the Wayback Machine and talk about the history of fentanyl. Fentanyl was first synthesized in 1959, believe it or not, by somebody named Paul Janssen. You might be familiar with Janssen Pharmaceuticals. It was his company. And basically what they did is they looked at opioid molecules and said, hey, how can we make them better? And what they wanted to do as far as better was they were looking largely for anesthetics. Okay, so less side effects, higher potency, fast onset. Okay, so that was kind of the goal. So they actually took the base molecule from Demerol, believe it or not, and they started adding stuff to it. And they came up with fentanyl in 1959. And fentanyl, pound for pound, is about 1,000 times more potent than morphine. So morphine is, morphine equivalence is how we look at narcotic, power, like the RPM level.
It's not 1,000 times more potent, 100 times.
I'm sorry, 100 times. I got it one factor. 1,000 times is one of the analogs, and we're going to get into that. And then there's the king of the analogs that kills tons of people, which is 10,000 times. So fentanyl's 100 times more potent, pound for pound, than morphine. Okay, so in morphine equivalence, it's 100 times. It has a shorter half-life. It's absorbed very quickly. So the drug was used in. It's a great pain-relieving drug in the correct settings, like in a hospital where you mix it into an IV, where you can give it to somebody IV, and they have a lockout pump post-operatively and so forth. But then they started building the fentanyl analogs, like alfentanyl, remifentanil, and sufentanil. Now, sufentanil is about 1,000 times more potent than morphine, and it's an anesthetic. They went, hey, this is great. It's a very short half-life, so it's in and gone very quickly from your system. So if you run it as an IV anesthetic, you can keep people asleep with a drug that's really easy to manage. When it's time to wake them up, you shut it off. The sufentanyl's gone. They wake up quickly. They have less nausea. They have, it's a fantastic anesthetic. Okay, so there's these fentanyl analogs that Janssen came up with. So alfentanyl, sufentanil, remifentanil, and then there's a veterinary drug, which we'll talk about in a little bit, called carfentanil. And when I looked at this, I said, Remi, Al, Sue. I mean, it sounds like it's the cast of a 70s. It's a 70s sitcom.
Well, it's better.
The Fentanyl Family.
It's better than nail polish colors, I guess.
So, yeah, anyways, the Fentanyl Family. So, where things get really crazy is that because the power of fentanyl as a dangerous recreational drug is because it is 100% synthetic. And we're going to get to a point why that's really, really important. So you can do stuff to this. Like you can take a fentanyl molecule and you can add like a hydrogen bonds, or you add a chlorine group or whatever, which is all, we're not going to get into all the organic chemistry, but you can mess with the base molecule and God only knows what it does. I mean, is it 1,000,000 times more potent than morphine? Is it less potent? Is it last longer, shorter? Who knows, right? And we're going to get into why that is super important as far as when it comes down to like the whole fatalities and all the rest of it. So it begs the question, why fentanyl? Why not just heroin?
Why? Oh, are you asking me or the listeners?
I'm asking
I mean, why
everyone.
are they using fentanyl?
So why would you, if you're, okay, you got to look at it, right?
Because you can manufacture it, even though it's not true, pure, even if it's jacked up, even if it's synthetic, you can manufacture it. And you can make more per gram, more potent, so you can produce more. You can cut it. It's easier to transport because it's more potent. It's concentrated.
Right. So if you're gonna get into the heroin manufacturing business, and if anyone that's watched Ozark understands this, you need a gigantic field of poppies. You need to grow opium poppies, and so the whole thing with Afghanistan being sort of the center of the heroin trade, because no one gave a crap if they grew opium poppies. But if you're
if you're not a gardener,
right,
it's not really for you.
Or if you're a gigantic Mexican drug cartel, you got to hide your poppy farms. Mm-hmm. So you're flying a plane over, you go, hey, there's a giant, you can kind of hide a weed farm because it's weed, right? It's a green plant growing out in the middle of the jungle. Pretty hard.
Maybe you could have the poppy farm next to your tulip farm and just...
Yeah, it's hard to hide a poppy farm.
I'm kidding.
And then, of course, you have to process it. So you have to harvest it. You have to have, the number of people you have involved in the operation is pretty significant. You got to get the latex bulbs out of the opium poppies, and then you got to, synthesize it into heroin. So there's a pretty significant amount of work that goes on. Plus, it's been illegal since for 100 years. Okay, since the Harrison Tax Act, it's been illegal. So it's on everyone's radar. It's illegal everywhere. It's not like you can go to some country and you can buy legal heroin. It doesn't exist. It's a Schedule I drug. There's no reason for it to exist, right? And so there's all these knocks against heroin. So because illicit drug producers are still business people, they figured out, well, man, fentanyl, if we use fentanyl, which is 100% synthetic, then then we can cut it, especially if you use something like carfentanyl, which is 10,000 times pound for pound, dose for dose, more potent than morphine. Carfentanyl is commercially available as a rhino tranquilizer. It literally is the wild animal tranquilizer dart medicine.
So somehow, over a brief period of time, there became a whole lot more rhinos in the world, or a demand from vets, right. And therefore the carfentanyl production went up. Does nobody police this stuff?
No, what ended up happening, we're going to get into that. How did that happen? Because, people started to recognize fentanyl as a drug of abuse with the Duragesic patch, which was transdermal fentanyl. So little tiny doses of fentanyl in a patch. You put the patch on, it crosses your skin, it goes straight into your body. Everybody's happy. Works out good. And then, you'd get guys that would go to nursing homes and go through the garbage and cut them open and get little tiny doses of fentanyl, and they're like, yeah, this stuff is really cool. But you couldn't just make it. Okay, that was the problem with fentanyl. Was the problem with heroin is opium production, right. Essentially. The problem with fentanyl is you need to be a scientist.
Well, you need access to the machines
and
to make it.
And you need to be a chemist. You need to get your Walter White on. This is where the story gets really, really crazy. Because virtually right now, 2021, virtually all of the fentanyl in the United States comes from
China. Via
Mexico. Yes. So the United States started to realize something. there was all these analogs of fentanyl. So they take the fentanyl base molecule, they add a little, of the Colonel's 11 herbs and spices to it, and then they it gets into the drug production. It goes to Mexico. They cut it with crappy heroin or whatever, and then they send it into the drug supply. Okay. Now it's really easy to transport this stuff.
Oh, it's crazy. What I was just reading about even today about how they get it over, like my mind was blown and ways you never think. I mean, gone are the days where you had to like stuff it into a mattress, like Escobar did with his stuff, or put it in someone's like condom rectum baggie.
Some people like condom rectum baggies. Do not judge.
Whatever. This stuff is so potent and so tiny and so light that they're using drones. They're going to Walmart. You can use a Walmart-sized drone, and they have these, they're calling them narco drones, and guys are sending them over with, like, I forget how many grams that thing can carry at a time. Like, it's like 23 pounds worth. It's insane.
They had a car fentanyl bust, just to give you a concept of how potent this is. They had a car fentanyl bust in Alaska. So it must have come in, my guess is it came in from, on a ship, and then it got put onto a truck, and they hid it in the refrigeration unit in a truck, in a semi-truck in Alaska. Somehow the police found this in the refrigerator, okay? And the refrigeration unit is just the thing that sits on the front of the truck. Inside that was enough car fentanyl to kill every single person in Canada.
Dang.
That's how potent it is. I mean, that's why the police are scared of this.
That's the size of California to people,
yeah.
So that people don't know how big Canada is.
Well, yeah, because think, well, there's like 6 hockey players and 2 igloos. But anyway, so like it's absolutely fascinating because it's terrifying for law enforcement, because if you get into a bust of an illegal lab that's manufacturing this, if it's car fentanyl, you can't get it to touch. You get enough of it to touch your skin, and it will kill you.
I was reading about that too. These police officers, they'll be in on a bus, they'll go into some place, pick this stuff up, and even though they're wearing gloves, it didn't say if they were wearing masks, but they're loading this stuff and processing it. They're actually having to call paramedics because they're starting to get symptoms of overdose, because it can soak in through the skin. You inhale it in tiny amounts. I mean, it's frightening.
Yeah, that's the difference between fentanyl and a lot of other opiates is how you can absorb it. Okay, it doesn't work very well orally. It's still 30 to 40% of it goes away just through your digestive system, but you can absorb it under your tongue, through your cheek, like if you had a pinch of chew, it's the same kind of thing. Transdermally through your skin. But again, if it's car fentanyl and it's 10,000 times more potent than morphine, you don't need much when you eat it.
No.
So it's just so deadly in so many different ways. And so the real key to the kingdom in how this is working now is analogs. So the United States looked at this and they said, if a drug is scheduled, in other words, if a drug is illegal, all of its analogs are also automatically illegal. Okay? And that law was passed. I think it makes perfect sense, because people would just change, add one little chemical, something or other to it, and then that drug's just legal, okay? And so the United States passed an analog law. Well, guess who didn't have an analog law?
China.
Mm-hmm. So China had no analog law. So what would happen is a drug would be unscheduled in China. It could be made in a gigantic commercial Chinese pharmaceutical laboratory right under the noses of the government. The government wouldn't care. Some of these companies in China that were manufacturing fentanyl and its analogs were winning awards for entrepreneurship. We're getting government grants through tax breaks.
Insane.
And sending poison to the United States.
That's crazy.
Okay, so then China, because China doesn't have a fentanyl problem. They have a meth problem. They don't have a fentanyl problem, so they don't really care. Okay? Maybe if they would have said there was Uyghur Muslims and Christians working in the lab, they would have shut them down, but who knows, right? So at any rate, then, international pressure comes and says, hey, you got to make this illegal. You got to make this illegal. You can't be sending us this. So then China, under pressure from other countries would say, all right, we're going to stop sending over this analog. And then the company would just make a different analog and keep sending it over. And it multiplies the problem because these analogs are never studied in humans. They're never really studied in anybody. They just know it's going to get you high, but they don't know what it's going to do because it's not studied in like there's no it's not it's a chemical plant just saying, hey, here's the base molecule. This works. People want it. We'll just add whatever. It won't be illegal, and they send it. So it's not that it's just fentanyl that's flooding into the United States. It's God knows what analog of fentanyl with who knows how much more dangerous it is than if you actually had commercial grade Janssen pharmaceutical fentanyl. And so this goes on and on and on and on. So eventually, under pressure, okay, the United States says this is you got to international pressure. You got to do something about this. You can't be sending analogs. So China passes an analog law. Okay, we're not going to send analog, analogs of fentanyl, ship them to Mexico. So then what happens? So then the problem is completely solved, right? No more analogs coming from gigantic labs. You're going to have to figure out how to do all this on your own. You're going to have to, get your degree in Walter White or whatever the case may be, right? Is that what happened? Did it make any difference in the problem?
No.
Why?
Because I'm stuck on this one.
These gigantic chemical companies just sent the precursors.
Oh, yeah.
So instead of sending the assembled Lego model, all assembled with all the Legos stuck together, and then that gets cut into heroin and shipped into the United States, they just sent the disassembled Legos.
So are they assembling this in Mexico?
They're assembling this in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
So then the base molecules are manufactured in gigantic super labs, some illegal, some under the table, some right in the some of them are giant chemical companies that work with the blessing of the Chinese government. They just send the base molecules over. And then the base molecules get assembled in Mexico. So, and what I want in my farm, can you, it's just, it's almost comical. Would you want a car that was manufactured in China and put together in Mexico? I really wouldn't. But hey, let's stick this in our arm and inject it. But nobody on the street knows where this is coming from because the street-level user thinks they're using heroin.
Right. Plus, the other important thing is that, so these things, people, first of all, when they're manufacturing this, its potency is, like we said before, measured in micrograms. It's super tiny. So it's really easy for, like, an illegal drug user to mess it up when they're making these batches, and every batch is not going to be the same because just a few extra micrograms, is going to kill the person. And so there's, it's like just infinitesimal differences in the amount that's in there is going to be lethal.
Let me read another quote from Fentanyl Inc. Okay, so this is about MAF, and MAF is a fentanyl analog called methoxyacetylfentanyl. Okay, this product, it was extremely potent. To make a nasal spray solution, a popular method for ingesting some opioids, he needed only tiny crumbs of the drug, 0.001 grams per milliliter of water, he said, plucking a couple crumbs off his burger bun and placing them on the table to illustrate. Because the guy that wrote this book actually was like interviewing the guys deep into the drug trade. When he sells it on the dark web, he charges $60 for a 5 milliliter bottle. One spray, he said, is the equivalent of one OxyContin pill.
Dang.
It's an incredible markup. At that ratio, $500 worth of product could potentially make him $600,000, though he said he had only made about $2,000 that year so far.
Right.
Because drug dealers, if nothing, are totally honest with their finances. So yeah, so you get the picture, okay? Is that this is, it's just wild how, it would be one thing. It would be one thing if you are a drug addict and you knew exactly what you're getting, but it's not that you just. It's not like what's cut is okay, it's more potent now. It's like the argument people make about legal weed. Well, it's way more potent. Yeah, but you go into a store, you know exactly what you're buying.
The other thing I think we should emphasize is that it's not like people are going out looking for fentanyl.
People are going out looking for opiates and thinking they're getting a Percocet tablet, and it's a pressed tablet sprayed with fentanyl tincture, so God only knows what the dose is.
Right. They're popping that in there to make it more potent so that people think that, it increases the potency, then it's better stuff, and they can put it in anything, into something that looks pressed and looks like a Xanax, a Percocet, an Oxy. Then they can... they make those pills to look almost exactly the same as the real thing.
Yeah, there's stories that they're pressing literally hundreds of thousands or millions of pills in storage lockers. It's unbelievable. So it segues into the next thing I want to talk about, which is NPS, which is novel psychoactive substances. Okay, and how we have gone from the concept of Breaking Bad with Walter White is this one chemist and he's taking over the meth market, to now we have an army of Walter Whites. And it's all brought to you by the internet and the dark web. And it's incredibly fascinating and horrifying at the same time. So for instance, you could go to a rave 15, 20 years ago, and you could buy 2 gin and tonics and an ecstasy. And you got 100% pure MDMA, and you had your party and everything was fine. You went home, you woke up the next day. Because I don't think there's ever been a single case of anyone overdosing and dying from MDMA. Okay? Mm-hmm. But then it gets scheduled. All right? So then the same thing. These novel substances start popping up. Well, how did they start popping up? Because people, you could go on the internet and you could read scientific journals of, I built this chemical. And then you could build the same chemical, in a crappy lab on your own. And then people would make analogs of those chemicals. Okay, so that's how you got bath salts.
I just love that bath salt.
So that's how but the reason they sold them as bath salts was because they weren't illegal, because they were analogs of analogs of analogs of psychoactive substances.
That's so naive. When I heard of that being sold at the corner store, I was like, why are people into taking a bath these days? Bath salts. Small town girl.
Yeah. No, it's a different thing. So, and that's a whole other set of drugs. And then you get in the dark web and it gets super crazy, because not only can you buy this, not only do they have a almost 100% secure economic exchange method with, Bitcoin and so forth, but they have forums for drug abusers. So there's a whole set of people that are into psychedelics and novel psychedelics called psychonauts.
Wow.
Instead of astronauts, they're psychonauts. And so they take these novel substances and they experiment with them, and then they publish what kind of trip they went on. It's unbelievable. Okay?
Weird.
And that's the other thing. All of these NPS drugs, all of these novel psychoactive substances, whether it's spice, which is a fake cannabinoid, K2, which is a fake cannabinoid, all of these, they're all dangerous. They're all potentially lethal or highly lethal, and they're all unstudied.
It's crazy.
Other than going on a psychonauts, site where a guy had, enough courage to start dosing himself with fake LSD.
Man, move over Pinterest.
Everyone needs a hobby.
Jeez.
Yeah. So this has become this absolute complete web of you can't schedule drugs fast enough. It's because immediately someone can build an analog now, and immediately it can be shipped. The vast majority of illegal drugs are shipped to people's houses.
Really?
Yes. You go on the dark web, you do your dark web search, you get into a chat room, you say whatever, and you send your Bitcoin, and your fake heroin or whatever just shows up at your house.
Wow.
It's literally like
if
all
it doesn't
of these
take
factors,
up the poor UPS man on the way.
right? But all of these factors have combined to make everything exponentially worse.
Well,
Okay,
and then look at what happened this past year with everybody locked down. I mean, with COVID and mental health issues and the fact that kids are socially isolated, they've got their sport taken away, their anything that means anything to them, their social support system. And now what's happened? It's just this last year's blown up. Like, I have this really good quote I read in an article said, fentanyl's like kerosene, meth is like natural gas, so then you put the COVID pandemic on top of it, and it's just like diesel fuel, and it just all blows up. And that's what happened last year.
yeah, and that's what we're going to get into in the next episode, which is really where do you go from here? Because I really want to build the case that, you know, the medical establishment owns a lot of this. We don't own the whole thing. I mean, we pulled our heads out of our rears when we realized that there was a lot of people dying from prescription drugs. Okay? But then it made things potentially worse because you were satiating the appetite of people that liked opiates. And then, you know, there's a certain percentage of people that are going to like opiates. Not everyone, most people don't like them. You know, their face gets itchy. They get in a bad mood. They're dysphoric. They're whatever. They don't want to take them. That's most people. It's just like alcohol. Most people don't want to get wasted. And if they do, they never want to get wasted again. They might want to have a glass of wine. They might want to have champagne a couple times a year. Like most people drink socially. They don't get in trouble. They don't get DUIs, but a certain subset become raging alcoholics that if they don't drink, they're going to have a seizure and die. And a bunch of people, you know, drink a little bit too much on occasion and get in car wrecks. Okay, so but most people use things responsibly. Most people abuse drugs of an illicit nature in a responsible way. That's the thing that we forget. It sounds crazy. And I would have never said this 20 years ago. And I would have never said it without like the kind of the research and sort of the epiphanies I've had with seeing, you know, I used to see 5,000 patients a year and just seeing this problem and how we have been part of it. And then we changed prescribing habits because we realized it was a bad idea and it made it worse.
Mm-hmm.
And then as the drug trade expanded through the dark web, through, you know, gigantic cartels getting out of cocaine and into opiates, it made it way, way worse with the advent of fentanyl and its analogs and the ability to ship this stuff all over the world and assemble it and sell it as something it's not. Like kids think they're taking a Xanax, okay? Like even if it's a 1 milligrams, even if it's 2 milligrams of you know, alprazolam, you're not going to die unless you're combining it with other drugs. You might sleep really well, but if you're taking that Xanax and it's actually pressed fentanyl,
well, that's the thing.
you're going to die.
Nowadays, you don't know that it's Xanax.
You
don't
don't know what you're getting on the street. And that is a huge portion because there's a subset of people that are going to use drugs. That's the way it is. It's estimated, I saw this from the Rand Corporation, it's estimated, and it's probably going to be way worse this year because of COVID, but that the economic impact of illicit drugs is worth about $150 billion a year, which is almost equivalent to what Americans spend on alcohol. Now, you think of how much alcohol is poured through this country.
Right.
You know, watch a football game and the guy's got like the, 10 of the 16-ounce cans next to him. And, people going out and having a cocktail and a bottle of wine. And, on and on and on and on. Just even in legitimate use. I mean, it is a ubiquitous substance in our society. Okay? And that economic impact is about the same as illicit drugs, which tells you there's a lot of, quotes, normal people using illicit drugs.
Right.
They can't all be living on the street. People living on the street and living under bridges and breaking into cars are not going to support a $150 billion a year industry.
True. But, I'm just thinking there's still, with the opioid overdose epidemic, there's like about 130 people dying daily from opioid overdoses. The economic impact. I mean, obviously there's still more people, like you say, who aren't dying, but
I'm not saying that they're highly functional. I mean, I don't know what. I mean,
if you're
hello,
it's like it's a Russian roulette game,
right? But I mean, I sat on credentials committee for a couple insurance companies. I mean, it's everywhere. It crosses across, drug abuse, all of this. It crosses every single socioeconomic indicator. I mean, when I was growing up, and really the beginning of medical practice, the idea of a heroin overdose. If you heard the word heroin overdose, you thought of two things. You thought of a junkie living in a flop house or in an alley or under a bridge,
right,
or a rock star.
Yep.
Right? So somebody with a tremendous amount of passion, a screwed up life, and tons of money, rock star, boom, they're dead.
Yep.
Scott Weiland, that's kind of scenario. Or somebody strung out, the crack whore kind of thing, right? That is not the world we live in. And intuitively it makes sense. You cannot get the spike in fatalities without a whole bunch of normal, highly functioning people making little tiny mistakes and paying the ultimate price. And so the question is, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it as a medical profession? What are we going to do about it as people that vote in a democracy that's going to make a dent? Because this is a public health crisis. COVID will go away. This time next year, it's probably going to be a really, really bad memory, like, the hemorrhoidectomy or something like that. You're sitting on a cushion for a while. But this public health crisis has been going on for decades, and it has taken off like a rocket ship in the last just handful of years, 4 or 5 years. And it really does need to be addressed at all levels. I mean, I did primary care, so I saw one end. I mean, I was writing some of these prescriptions. Okay? So I get that. And we need to own that. And then,
I know, and I think that, they talk about the war on drugs. It gets put out there depending on what other admin's in power, but most people just go, yeah, I think a lot of people still think it's the drug addict under the street living in a box or the tent, or the superstars with all the money, and yeah, I think that a lot of people still haven't seen it come close enough to home yet.
Well, and the thing about that is there's a moral side to that, which I think we need to crush. Okay? And if you were Scott Weiland and you overdosed, or Lane Staley from Alice in Chains, it's kind of like they deserved it. Like, I can, in my own judgy heart, I can say, well, he deserved it. He knew better. He was rich. He had access to rehab. He saw his friends die. Mm-hmm. He deserved it. He could have backed off. It's like he deserved it. Okay? And so it's easy if you see a problem that's somebody's fault, that, well, they deserved it. Okay?
Right. They should have known better. They were dabbling with the devil.
They danced too close to the edge. I mean, I've and this may be another podcast, he died doing what he loved. I've lost lots of friends in skydiving, and, that's the biggest pile of BS ever. I hate that. But, this whole idea of, living on the edge, and he lived too close to the edge, and he fell off the tightrope, but at least he died doing what he loved. Okay, but, what if you were the kid? We're at the point now where, you're watching Nick Lewendo walk across the Grand Canyon, and you're the kid standing there watching it, and the rope snapped, and it cut your head off. And that's kind of the place we're at now, where, first of all, I'm going to call BS on the whole he deserved it thing anyways. That's just judgy and stupid. But at the same time, we're getting into a point now where you can make one little mistake. Like Eric Bolling, who was on Fox News, his son never used anything. And I was like, nah, that's stupid. He just pulled the wool. No, I believe him now. His kid went to a party, had a couple drinks. Hey, try this. It's going to be super fun. Boom, dead. Well, how does that happen? Well, because it happens every single day. Just try this. You'll be fine. It's just the Xanax. Boom, dead. And that is That is a drug abuse problem, a public health problem that is completely different than when we were in training, than when I was a kid in high school, sitting there and watching somebody drop acid in English class with zero measurable effect.
And I'm just thinking, even in the last 12, well, not 12, even less, 8 years, things have completely flipped with how the crisis has changed because of the synthetic analogs and what's been happening in the manufacturing.
Yeah, it is a completely different world. They said that there's so much. Listen to this. There's so much money being made in fentanyl and fentanyl analogs being imported from China into Asian gangs into the lower mainland of British Columbia that it has altered the real estate market. Part of the reason why the average price for a house in the lower mainland of British Columbia is $1 million. Okay, that is in a 2 million person suburb or metropolis. The average price of a single family home is $1 million. Mm-hmm. Part of that is because there's so much wealth being created from the illegal drug trade. Put that one in your crack pipe and smoke it. Like, holy mackerel.
Wow.
So next time we're going to go and talk about, is there anything we can do? Is there anything that would potentially work? Because clearly what we're doing now is not working. So we need different strategies. We need different strategies from law enforcement, from our governments, and I think we need different strategies and attitudes as individuals in the community and as physicians seeing patients, because this is a far bigger, way more ubiquitous problem. I mean, we would counsel kids when they come in for a visit on, whether your parent has their gun locked up, when statistically bathtubs kill more people than accidental firearm discharges.
Well,
yet you got a 17-year-old going to a party or going off to college for the first time, and they're off into the netherworld of, here, take half the Xanax. It's really cool.
Right. Yeah, and these are accidental overdoses. These aren't suicide overdoses. These aren't kids looking to end it when this crap happens. This is, you're out there, you're naive, you're dumb, you're willing to try something, you're trusting, and boom.
Yep. So that's for next week.
And on that note, I just want to remind everybody that today's sponsor is the Alpha Coaching Experience. Act now to claim your spot in the spring enrollment before the doors close on February 22nd at midnight. There is no better time than now to make the change you know you deserve to be a better partner, parent, and physician. Enroll today at the drpodcastnetwork.com/alpha. Again, that's drpodcastnetwork.com/alpha.
Because everyone needs to be an alpha. All right, we will see you all next Thursday.
Yeah, see you next Thursday. And our next episode coming out should be another Doc Tales with Cocktails. And we got some fun being planned for you in that episode. We hope you can join us then. And just remember, the best thing you can do to help us out is share this podcast with a friend and have them listen. It would really mean the world to us.
All right, later.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit, uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more, and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
While we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible, we can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc at bsfreemd.com.